Hey there, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the Build Your Copywriting Business podcast. Hey there, Kate.
Hello.
Hello. Okay, today we are going to talk about communication. Specifically, what is the best way to do it for your clients? What is the best way to do it for you? And what is the best way to make sure that no communication would actually ever get missed? Because that is a bad scenario.
It's happened. It's the worst. It's not fun when things go to spam by mistake.
Yes.
Pro tip, check your spam folder. And if you don't, put a calendar reminder each week to just check it and clear it out because, you'd be surprised what goes there.
Well, that's a great place to start, really. Where are you potentially getting incoming messages from clients? Where do you have the channels open to get those incoming messages? Number one, probably just regular email. A previous client might pass along your email to one of their colleagues. So to Kate's point, check your inbox regularly, certainly, but check your spam folder as well, because all kinds of weird stuff ends up in spam. All kinds of stuff.
And then obviously add it to your safe sender list, but you got to keep checking it because, I think the referral is a great example.
Exactly. Kate, what's one of your favorite tips for checking?
Every coaching call we talk about this because we look at portfolios and you need to test that your form's working on your portfolio site, but B, where are those messages going? And so I think the easiest place, if you're doing a lot via email, having that form connected to your email so you don't have to go to a separate, whether you're hosted on Squarespace or WordPress or wherever, and go into a specific platform to find that message as well. Most of them easily connect to your email. And so you want to make sure, that your form is working, test it regularly. Don't just assume that it's going to keep working because stuff happens. So again, put a calendar reminder to just, hey, testing my form. Great. Still works. I got it in my email. Super. But that's another one that often goes to spam. Some of my inquiries through my website form go to spam in my email. So another reason to check spam.
Yes. And then of course, check all of your social media profiles. If you're on Instagram, be checking your DMs. If you guys aren't connected, it's not going to go through as a message. It will go through as a request, and you have a separate requests folder. You have to check that requests folder.
Facebook, the same thing. Yeah.
Exactly. Same thing on Facebook. Be checking your LinkedIn inbox. And don't rely on these social media sites to be sending you emails to alert you.
Yes.
Sometimes I've noticed with LinkedIn, sometimes it sends me a message, sometimes it doesn't. But it's also easy to miss those messages because I get a lot of messages from LinkedIn. So check these regularly. I would recommend checking your email inbox, obviously, spam folder, and all of these, because it can just be a quick check. It should take you no more than a minute or two to check each of these, but check each of them daily. Maybe it's how you start your day, or maybe it's how you end your day, however you want to do it, or right before lunch, right after lunch. Doesn't matter, but make sure that you're checking each one, because even if a day goes by and a client doesn't hear from you, or if a couple of days go by and if a couple of days go by and a client doesn't hear from you, it does not reflect well on you. And it may make them think, I don't think I want to work with this person. I made that decision when I don't hear from vendors and they tell me I'm going to hear from them, it's not the kind of person I want to work with. And they're immediately off my list.
Yeah, which is a good reminder to set. If you are on vacation, that's valid, but make sure that's very clear and those messages are going out to people that are sending inquiries, but also just on a regular basis to say, hey, I respond to inquiries to my web form within 24 hours or 48 hours or whatever, 2 business days. Make sure the communication is very clear of when people can expect to hear back from you. You should take time off and that's okay, but make sure that that communication's very, very clear. To note too, if you do have a Facebook page for your business, again, not necessary, but if you have it, that communication doesn't go through Messenger, that goes through the page. So you need to log in, switch it from your personal to your page and look at the messages coming in specifically to that inbox too.
Yes. Or I've noticed that sometimes it does. Every once in a while, I'll get an alert while I'm on my personal profile versus one of the business profiles. And that could tempt you to think like, oh, I always get the notifications there. Not the case. I think just every once in a while when you haven't logged into the business profile, we have so many people on our team. When I haven't logged in for a while, it's like, hey, I want to entice you back over here. So don't rely on, you have to check them out individually. And if you're thinking, oh my gosh, it's too many channels. Yes, in theory, if you're thinking, it's too many channels, too many places to check. In theory, you could stop receiving messages. You could set your Instagram up so that you can't receive messages. You could set your Facebook page up so that you can't receive messages. Probably you could set up LinkedIn so that you can't receive messages. And normally I'm all for streamlining, but in this scenario, you want to make it as easy as possible for a potential client to get in touch with you. So if they get to your Instagram profile and they're like, "Ooh, I like the work that this person does," you want to make it so easy that they can just click message you versus, "Oh, I can't message them, so I have to go through to their website and then I have to fill out the form."
Go off the platform. You never want to take people off the platform if you don't have to.
Yes, exactly. Because the chances just decrease exponentially that they just won't ever bother following up with. So
Well, think about if you're on Instagram, like you're scrolling, you're looking at video, you see something you're interested in. Cool. You want to do it in the platform and then go back to what you were doing. You don't want to go off and then, oh, now I'm out of Instagram and now I'm in this other, like that's a pain and it's not a great user experience.
Yes, exactly. I perpetually am opening tabs, like open a new tab or whatever it's called, open in the browser, and I just never go back to it. So make it, as much as I'm all for streamlining, in this case, make it super simple for people to get in touch with you. Now let's talk about outreach, you reaching out to other people.
Yeah, the initial outreach, we always recommend email. That's, you want to get where people are checking on a daily basis, and email is still it. I know some people think, well, can I just message them on LinkedIn or on Instagram or on these platforms? And again, it's your business. You can do whatever you want. But our recommendation, strong recommendation, is to send it via email. You have that record then. You can do follow-ups very easily by just replying to that initial email. And so they can see then that initial message right below it with all of your great information in there. And it feels a little less, at least to me, I don't know if you feel this way, Nikki, but a little less jarring and like, pay attention to me right now. Email gives that aspect of like, yes, this is here and it's on your timeline, versus a DM can feel very personal,
invasive.
Yes. Yeah. Before you've actually connected with this person.
Yeah. It's also really easy for someone to mark you as spam. And that can affect your social profiles, if not get you knocked off completely. We had a student, I think a couple of years ago, who said, I know you said to do email, but instead I did a DM on Instagram and now I'm locked out of my Instagram, or Instagram took down my profile. Because the thing is that our students know that we advocate taking out any and all sales stuff. But let's say maybe you hadn't posted your pitch for feedback and maybe you accidentally left something in that felt a little salesy. Because DMs can be so personal and then can feel a little invasive, you might get the wrong person who just immediately clicks spam because they don't want to hear from you. They don't realize that you're trying to give them a gift, give them ideas. They think that you're trying to sell. And so they mark you as spam. And then on the other side of that, LinkedIn kind of has the opposite problem in that the vast majority of messages on LinkedIn are bad pitches. I won't just say pitches, because we know that the pitches that we do are good and very valuable, but the vast majority of messages now, unless it's from somebody you are actually connected to and friends with, in which case just text me. But oh man, I owe someone a message back on LinkedIn as we say this. Just text me. Yeah, Brad, just text me. But because almost all the messages you get on LinkedIn, even if they get a message from you, they might not open it because they just assume that it's going to be a bad pitch. Not a good pitch like the ones that we do, but a bad pitch.
Or an in-mail, because a lot of LinkedIn, you can I write this for clients all the time and try to make them super valuable and great. But nonetheless, you can directly advertise to people in their in-mail. So it feels like a personalized message that they're getting in this inbox, but it's an ad. And so depending on the person, especially if they're in marketing, they might be very savvy and sensitive to that and just like, oh, it's just another ad, just someone else who got my name from a list or whatever and is sending me something.
Yeah, exactly. So could you use these platforms to follow up? Yeah, that's a possibility. You should still follow up via email, but we don't recommend using them as your first reach out point.
But Nikki, what if I can't find them anywhere else?
You should give up. Just give up completely. No, here's the thing. It takes a little bit of research sometimes for some clients, but we know there are a lot of different ways to find that email address. First of all, just find Google. If you find an email for Kate Jones at XYZ Corporation and you want to get in touch with Nikki Smith at XYZ Corporation, but you don't know what Nikki Smith's email address is, but you know that Kate Jones's email is k.jones at XYZ Corporation. So really good chance that Nikki Smith's is going to be n.smith at XYZ Corporation. Yeah. So all you have to do is find one email.
I agree. I feel like typically there are three formulas for emails. It's first initial, last name. So K Jones at blah, blah, blah. Or first name, last name, Kate Jones at xyzcompany.com. Or just the first name, like a very small like startup. I feel like typically sometimes they do just first name. So like Kate at xyzcompany.com. And honestly, if you try any of those, chances are one of those will probably work.
And there are also all kinds of services that you can use to find people's email, find people's Rocket Mail is one of them, I think.
Hunter.io.
And there are probably new ones cropping up every day, but they basically just go out, search it, and keep the information in there. They think you have to pay eventually, but the first several searches are free. The first couple of searches a month are free. But usually if you do just a little bit of research, you can find it. Also, or like worst case, which is not even worst case, call up the place of business and ask what the email address is. Hey, I'm looking to get so-and-so's email address. Can you pass that along for me? Oh, I just wanted to send them through an idea I had. I really loved their XYZ and I wanted to send through an idea. Great. They will probably give you that email address. But again, that's you just doing a little bit of searching on the internet will likely find you that email address. Just don't give up if you're immediately like, oh, I looked at their website and I couldn't find their email address. Not to get off on a tangent, but don't email the info at XYZ Corporation.
These are black holes typically.
Black holes. They get checked like once a month, once every 2 months, probably checked by an intern. It does they are not incentivized to get it to the right place. Now, if you accidentally email the wrong person, well, when you send a really, really great pitch email, the value-full pitch email, the way that we do, there's a very good chance they're going to forward it on to the right person.
Yeah. No one wants to be the person that deletes an email that they shouldn't have deleted.
Exactly. Okay. So that's outreach. Now, once you have a client, what is the best way to communicate with your client?
However the client wants to communicate. Typically, obviously, if you have specific needs or parameters or boundaries that you're very, very strongly about setting, obviously work with the client to say, hey, this is how I best work and receive information. Does that work for you? But you want it to be a conversation.
Yeah, exactly. Ask your client how they want to communicate. Maybe they say, oh, we do everything over email. Okay, great. Or your client may say, we do absolutely everything in this company over Slack. We'd like to get you on our Slack channel. Now, maybe you've never used Slack before. Maybe it's completely new to you. But here's the thing. If they do everything over Slack, they're not going to like it if you're the one person who's like, no, I do everything over email. You have to meet your client where they are. If they do everything over Slack, then all right, you know that for this client, you're going to have to do everything over Slack. Now, if they give you an option, if they say, well, we can do it over email or we could do it over Slack, and you prefer over email, if this would be the one client you would have to work with on over Slack, then do email. Don't add, well, we do Slack, we do Voxer, we do this, we do that. Don't add a bunch of different channels. It should be limit your channels even amongst your clients, if at all possible, but also choose one way to interact with your clients, because I was going to say the worst, not the worst, but a very stressful and annoying and often confusing way to communicate with clients is when you have like 4 different channels of communication where you email sometimes, you Slack sometimes it's Voxer, sometimes it's this. You do not want to get into that. It gets very, very confusing, very convoluted.
Yeah, I have a client that likes to use Slack for a lot of their communications and then uses Jira as their project management system. And so what I always do is I say, okay, like if someone sends feedback through Slack, I say, great, I'm going to throw this into Jira so we have it there. And that is my one source of truth. And so that has become my process to say, I'm going to take this and copy it into a comment per Joe's comment on January 16th. Via Slack, and I'll copy and paste that actual message from Slack into Jira so we have this one record of truth of what's going on in the project. And I find if a client has a project management system, you want as much as possible in that project management system because it becomes very easy to search that specific project for what the record of comments and feedback were, especially when things can change. Hey, why did you make this change to this word? This happens all the time. And you can say, shoot, I have 5 clients right now. I don't know why I made this change, but I know there was a reason. You can go back then to that one source of truth and know where it is and say, hey, I know per this client stakeholder's feedback on XYZ date, this is why we changed this wording, or this is why we adjusted this copy. Here's what it was before. And we can absolutely go back to that, but there is a reason why it is what it is now. That happened very recently with a client of like, again, client coming via email, but also then sending a PDF and saying, okay, if we have this one project management system, it's all going into there to say, here's where it all lives so we can reference it, because there's nothing worse. And yes, Slack is searchable. I find it's a lot less focused because it's literally all of Slack versus if you put it into your project management system for a specific project and you have a question on a specific project, it's a lot faster for you in the long run to have it all there to find exactly what you're looking for.
Yeah, exactly. Imagine trying to track a conversation across 4 different platforms. Like, impossible.
Yeah. And it was like, was it with this individual person on Slack? Was it with this group on Slack? Was it with this channel on Slack? I don't remember which thing.
Exactly. And you shouldn't have to remember. It shouldn't be, you shouldn't have to rely on remember. I think maybe she said that to me Thursday 2 weeks ago. I remember I was meeting my friend for lunch, and what day was that? Or like, no, you shouldn't have to deal with that. I will say, though, that even if a client says, okay, well, we do everything on Slack, and you say, okay, I'm going to get on Slack, you can set parameters there, though. You can say to your client, absolutely happy to be on Slack. Just so you're aware, I'm going to be checking Slack messages from 9 to 9:30 and from 2 to 2:30 in the afternoon. Which means that, number one, your client, your client knows when they can expect to get that feedback from you. And in fact, you can even set it up on, this is just for Slack, for example, but you can set up your profile to say, I check Slack from 9 to 9:30 and 2 to 2:30 or whatever. So they can even see it right there, but they know what they can expect from you. And also you can turn off, you can only get notifications during that period of time, but also you don't have to be constantly going back there and checking to see if there was any kind of messaging. On top of the fact that you aren't constantly going to be distracted by messages coming in.
I turn mine off.
Oh, I do too. I turn off the sound. It's way too much.
And even the alerts
even
too.
The alert. Yeah, exactly.
So distracting. Yeah.
It's a lot. But you can do the same thing on email. I say, all right, just so you know, I check my email messages from, whatever time. And you can even have that in a reply just to that client. And maybe in a reply, I wouldn't mass email that out necessarily, because maybe a new email depends on how you write it, whatever. But you can have an automatic reply that says, great. Outside of those hours, I'll be checking email within these periods of time, and I'll get back to you right after that. But you can set up parameters so that you don't have to constantly be at a client's beck and call. Remember, you are not an employee. You are not on staff. If you are, you can even still do that if it's okay with your employer. But the expectation is not that you are sitting in front of your computer from 9 to 5 each day. If you are an employee, it might be a little bit different, but even still then, you should be able to get a little bit of time away from Slack and email and all that kind of stuff. But the expectation is not that you're just sitting there, wait to respond to them at any time. You, being a freelancer and having many different clients that you're dealing with, you need to control those rivers of communication, all of those inputs, because if you are constantly trying to respond to everything, seeing all these notifications coming up, watch it, it's going to get overwhelming, and you have way more important things to be doing than to watch the notifications and respond at every single moment.
Well, it's going to be a time suck. It's going to completely ruin your productivity. And so what I've seen actually people do too with basically, you're setting your boundaries too. I've seen it in email signatures of here's when I check my email. And, if you have a blanket kind of timing of here's the times of day that I do this, then that works. And if it doesn't, if you're like, this client I really like working with and might respond to them faster, maybe a blanket email signature doesn't work. But really, it's all about communication is all about communication. How about that? But the methods of communication, just setting up kind of what your expectations are too. And obviously doing as much as you can to work with the client and meet them where they are, but knowing what you need to get the job done too. And I think one important thing to note too is if, for example, using Slack as an example, if your client expects you to be on Slack, they're adding you to their account. You don't need to go and purchase Slack for yourself right now, for example, by any means. I would not do that. It doesn't make sense. You don't need it. Anytime a client is expecting you to be on if there is a certain platform that they're using, they should be adding you to that platform. And there shouldn't be any work on your end in terms of incurring any sort of costs to communicate with the clients in this way. If there is, and I can't think of an example off the top of my head of where a client was like, you must have this for me to communicate with you and it's going to cost you something, you either need to say, hey, I'm happy to do that, but this will be roll that cost. You don't necessarily have to tell them, but roll that cost into what you're charging that client on a project basis. Another thing we want to make sure we touch on is communicating with your client via text, which the thought of it, yes, if you're watching this, Nikki's face says it all for me.
Yeah.
If my eyes could bulge any further, they would. I think the one thing to think about again, it's your business. And if you like texting a client and having that sort of very close communication, to me, it feels like it crosses a personal boundary for me. My phone is a personal device. And if I'm meeting with clients, it's typically via Google Meet, Zoom, something on my laptop. I separate those things. And I need that for my mental health. I need that for my sanity. And I don't want to be caught, especially because a text on my phone could come up at any point. And I want to, when I leave work behind, to be able to leave work behind. And a text does not allow me to do that. So that's my personal take. I think the other thing to note, though, too, is that once you start that process with a client, it's going to be very hard to end that type of communication with the client to say, hey, I'm not texting anymore. You certainly can, but that is a much harder habit to break if you've gotten into that habit that a client can reach you at any point, and especially if you are responding right away as it comes in, which I think is very easy to do via text unless you're putting your phone in another room while you work, which is a great tactic, yes. But out to dinner with friends and a client because you think, oh no, the client's not going to text me at midnight on a Friday right before New Year's. Yes, they will.
They will. Yeah. And if you're thinking, well, all right, what if I'm not out with friends? But what if I'm just sitting at home on the sofa? It's 8 o'clock at night. I'm sitting home. The client's not going to text. First of all, yeah,
yes,
they will.
They are.
They will. I will tell you, as a business owner, I'm thinking about business all the time. And if your client is of the mind of like, oh, I'm just going to send this out because then it's off my mind. And they don't need to respond.
Exactly.
It's off my mind. It's on somebody else's plate. But they will text when they think of it. And yes, maybe there will be some nights where you're sitting at home on the sofa at 8 o'clock and you're like, yeah, it's not a big deal. I can deal with this now. I can respond to it. That's going to happen a lot more regularly. And all of a sudden you don't have boundaries between your work time and your time off anymore. And time goes by and all of a sudden you go, I am working constantly. Why can't I relax? Why can't I take a break? Exactly. Yeah. Why can't I decompress? Thank you, Kate. It is very, very easy to let that happen with texting. And unfortunately, the expectation with texting is an instant response because we have our phones with us. And even if your client, like Kate was saying, even your client doesn't, they may say like, oh yeah, you don't have to text me back immediately. You don't have to text me. For me too, it's a problem because once I read a text message, then it's not highlighted anymore. Then it's not marked as to read, which means that I've read it. So I might forget about it unless I respond immediately. So for text messages in general, I do respond almost immediately because if I don't, I will forget about it. Well, okay, but you could just leave the notification. I mean, see it comes in from client, just leave the notification up. Then every time I look at my phone, exactly, then it's this open loop. I'm going to see this notification. I'm not going to want to use my phone because I'm saying, oh, I don't want that kind of intrusion. I think, Kate, you're saying the same thing. I don't want that kind of intrusion into my personal life, especially when there are plenty of ways to communicate with me within business hours. And even if you want to, outside of business, you send me an email at 9 o'clock at night to my business account. Fine, knock yourself out. I'm not looking at it. But I can set up that boundary because it's to business or to Slack or to whatever, which actually maybe that's a good point about business profiles and that kind of thing on your phone and the like.
Another thing to think about as we're talking about all this too with communication and just access and how much access you're giving your clients to you. I want to make it clear that there's no such thing as a copy emergency. There just isn't. No one's going to die based on copy we do or do not write. I know someone can probably come up with an example. Well, but Kate, what if we're writing copy for a hospital and all? Sure, maybe there's
it's copy. You're not putting organs in people's bodies.
We're not an ER doctor. And so that's always what I think about is that no client needs this much access to me. And if they do, that's an unhealthy boundary both for me and for them. And I know it can feel very hard to set that boundary, but it's necessary, I promise.
Or if they want to do it on a limited basis, then they can pay you for it. Like say you have a client that says, oh, we have this project that it has to go out tomorrow by end of day. And I know we're going to be making tweaks. And I know you normally only check Slack twice a day. Can we have more access to you tomorrow? Because I think we're going to need it. You say, yes, absolutely. And you charge for it because then you are at their beck and call and you're working for them.
Yes.
But that is prearranged and it's also limited. It's not.
And you go back to your pre-existing boundaries.
Exactly.
But the other thing to think about is you're on your phone. What do you put on your phone, on your personal device? And even if you're like, well, but I use my phone for business and personal, fine. But I would strongly consider, and even if you try it for just a week, taking the tech for your business off of your phone potentially. I get that if you're out and you're like, well, but I go to my kids and I pick them up from school and I tether my phone to my laptop when I want to do work out in a mobile situation. I personally find the separation extremely helpful, and especially because there's no temptation. I buried all my business apps on my phone. I don't receive any notifications. So for example, I do have Asana on my phone, our project management system that we use, so that if I need access to it for some reason, it is there, but I am not tempted to check it at any point. I do not have Facebook on my phone. I took Facebook off my phone and it was the best decision ever. I never check it. Nikki told me about this app, and we may have talked about this on the podcast before, called OneSec, and I put that on Instagram. So Instagram is still on my phone, but I have this OneSec app. So anytime I'm like mindlessly going over to Instagram, this pops up and it says breathe. I'm like, oh yeah. It's like, are you sure you want to open Instagram?
No, I don't want to.
No, I actually don't. I don't. So setting up what works for you. What do you really need on a personal device? And again, if you're like, yeah, but it's personal business, can you separate that so that you, in the long run, have these, when you are out and about again, your phone doesn't have to have that distraction of anything related to work on it. I took my work email is not on my phone at all. I can't access work email at all on my phone.
Just kidding. Technically, I'm Kate's boss. Totally fine with this. But that's the thing too, is that even if you're like, so I have it on my phone, but I also, it's not on my main screen, right? So if I want to see, and I have outside of work hours, I have those notifications turned off. So before 9, it's off. After, I forget if it's 5:30 or 6, the notifications are off. And on the weekends, the notifications are off. So if I'm out and I'm curious and I want to see, oh, did so-and-so get back to me? I can do, but number one, it's not on my home screen. So even if there are alerts, even if there are, the little red bubbles, I'm not going to see it immediately. And I won't be tempted.
Asana's buried on mine too. It's like deep into the phone.
Yes. So I won't be tempted to log into it, but I still have the option. Yeah. If I'm, I don't know, waiting in line at the bank or the other places where one waits in line, I think, oh, I want to see if so-and-so got back to me or whatever. Check this. I could do that. But I'm not immediately prompted every time I pick up my phone to check my work email or to check Asana or to check all of those kinds of things. The thing is that all of these platforms, all of these things are set up to grab our attention. And so we have to safeguard our attention because it is a valuable, valuable commodity.
Yeah. And I know we've talked about frequency and talking about I check email at this time and at this time. And just to dig into that slightly more, putting expectations on the cadence with which you will communicate with clients, I think is huge, to set that expectation from the beginning in case your client has a different expectation in terms of what they need. I think the example of, hey, this is a rush project. Again, you're charging for it. What are the parameters of the project? Is it a big project that's going to continue for several months? Okay. Hey, client, my typical process is I'm going to send you this outline of what I'm thinking for this on this date, and then I'm going to follow up with a first draft on this date, and then a second draft on this date, or whatever it is. Maybe they already have a timeline, but if they don't, you communicating on you of here's what to expect from me. You want to set your client up with clear expectations of when they can hear from you, check-ins for the project, key milestones throughout it. And if you're thinking, well, what are my key milestones? Again, if it's a bigger project, you want to have places where you check in, even if it's just to say, hey, this project's still on track, still like loving digging in. I'm having so much fun. Just wanted to let you know that we're still on track for X deadline, whatever it is, especially if you kick something off and then it's weeks before you're delivering something. Just that touch base can set a client's mind at ease. So thinking about when to communicate with a client, err on the side of over communication in the sense of just like, hey, wanted to let you know the status update. Maybe if you're working with a client regularly, that's something you set up to do at the end of every Friday, at the end of the week, to say, hey, here's what was on my plate for the week, and here's where everything is. Have a great weekend. Come up with what makes sense for you and for your client. Again, they might already have expectations. Hopefully they've communicated them, but they may have not, which is, I think, the other important thing to know, which is why it's on you to raise this conversation and be that partner for them to say, hey, here's where I'm coming from. Here's my typical process. Does that mesh with what you're expecting?
Absolutely. Expectations. Yeah, that is exactly the perfect way to do it. Here's how I usually do that. Does it work for you? Because if it doesn't, then they say, oh, actually, we'd prefer X, Y, Z. But if it does, then you know exactly what's going to be. But you don't have to wait for them to bring it up. I love how you put that, Kate. I think that's the perfect way to do it.
Yeah, you want to do it as early as possible so that this relationship kicks off on the right foot and stays on the right foot.
Yes, exactly. As with any relationship, right? It's about setting the expectations, making sure that communication is open and clear. But again, balancing, as with any relationship, balancing boundaries as well. So as you're planning on how you're going to be reaching out in the world, as you are going to be taking incoming messages, as you're going to be communicating with your clients, figure out what works for you. And then, yes, sometimes you might have to accommodate clients in certain ways. That's okay. But also make sure you're not bending over backwards. Make sure that you are not letting it encroach your peace of mind, because you need your peace of mind. You need your creativity to do your best work. So make sure that you are protecting yourself and protecting your energy while still communicating in an open and timely, not immediate, timely way with potential clients and with clients. So that's what we got for you. Now you should have a pretty comprehensive idea of exactly how to reach out, how to accept outreach, how to answer when people message you, and how to communicate with the clients that you do land. And so with that, we'll catch you in the next episode. Bye, everybody. Like what you heard? Hit subscribe so you never miss a video. And if you're ready to take the first step toward becoming a copywriter yourself, sign up for a free video training right here.